We've had some pretty major revelations. There's a lot more to come, and with only one episode left, the big question remains, will they stick the landing? Hello and welcome to Panelism, the podcast where we talk about the comics and graphic novels worth having on your shelf and more. I'm Taylor Trask.
I'm Todd A.
And this is another watching episode, specifically watching The Watchmen.
Yeah.
It's we're gonna have other things to watch too, you guys. Like this is, and yeah, I did a little. I don't know if you missed it, I did a little Dr. Sleep sort of watching kind of mini-sode. But we just talked before we started recording. I think we're gonna do Silicon Valley coming up at some point, maybe his Dark Materials, which I'm loving, absolutely loving. You haven't jumped into that one yet, have you?
No, I have not. I haven't. Yeah, not at all.
Yeah, so we're gonna have more of that, and we're going to talk about more books coming up soon too. So look forward to that. And after last episode, I think maybe less on the Apple promos, just a little bit.
Our pilot episode of Tech Talk with Todd and Taylor. T squared or whatever it was. We didn't, it took us a while to get to the actual show that we were reviewing. I'll tell you what, I'm ready to jump back into books at some point.
Yeah, same.
You and I were also talking about some stuff coming up because have a stupid TBR pile, as I always do, but it is even worse now.
On that note, I'm glad you brought that up. On that note, this weekend, I posted on Instagram a week or two ago as well to this effect, but it became painfully clear to me that I need to start winnowing down my collection. So I really took a hard look at my shelves and actually have a nice little stack of stuff that I am passing on to other generations. And some of them we may have even doing some giveaways. Some of it's not really. They were just mediocre books from the beginning, but there's a few that I'm like, ooh, this would, for example, I'm a big Injustice Gods Among Us fan. And for a hot second, I thought I was going to collect them all in like sort of their omnibus trade paperbacks. And I have in my hands right now the year one complete collection, which is killer. But when you add up all the years, it is like a whole shelf just for the Injustice Gods Among Us. And I ended up buying every issue digitally anyway on Comixology, which I prefer for that particular story. So I have a pretty much mint condition Injustice Gods Among Us year one, and we'll probably give that away at some point. Got some other cool stuff. What I don't have, if you're a fan of the show, I do not have in my stack a Red Mass for Mars, which I have purchased 3 times and have given back 3 or have donated 3 times. I am no longer purchasing that book, so don't look forward to that. But I have some other.
Is that
cool
the early
stuff.
Hickman?
Yeah, that's like Hickman's 3rd or 4th thing. So it was like, after Nightly News and after Pax Romana, he's like, I'm going to work with another illustrator who's not me, and it was just a lot of interesting but ill-formed ideas that
You've described this on a previous episode where you're like, I got to be a completist.
I do. When I bought it 3 times, I bought it 3 separate times because I'm like, each time I'm like, maybe this is like a Bowie album. And I haven't caught up to him yet. And then, you read it and you're just like, no, this is just terrible. And the other thing is it's Hickman, right? So you want to make sure you're almost like, how could he do anything bad? And then, like all creators, there are some rare misses, and that is certainly one of them. So more on that. Hey, by the way, as we're getting ready to go here, I have the Watchmen fandom wiki page pulled up because we're going to talk Watchmen on HBO. And right off to the side in their sidebar, there is a Discord chat window. And I know previously we talked about maybe starting a Slack channel, maybe starting a Reddit channel or something. Maybe Discord is the...
That is one that I've brought up that might... Yeah. I'm seeing it more and more. So I think if anyone has an opinion on that, please let us know through Instagram.
If you're a Discord fan, and I have not, I'm really feel like an old man. Like, what is this Discord these kids are using these days? I might get a little chat going. It's interesting that we're kind of almost going backwards now. Where remember when we were late 90s, mid 90s, late 90s, like AOL Instant Messenger was it. That was all. I mean, basically what is social media, Slack, Skype, all of that now, that was just AIM for the longest time. Like AIM was like the currency of the internet. Now it feels like we're kind of like chats, chat bots and chat windows and all this kind of stuff and private networks. Like we're going back to it. And I'm kind of, I don't know, it's nostalgic, but I also think it's probably a good direction to go in.
I agree, and I think it's a good direction to go into because all the promise of social media we've watched be undone over the last 4 years by like bots and influence campaigns, for lack of a better term. Like, how does one of the Kardashian children influence us on Discord, like in a chat? They just pop in like, I see you guys are talking about D&D. Have you tried out my new D&D flavored perfume? Like, it's just. It's a tougher way to enter. It's like it's actually a more authentic human, interaction than Facebook or Twitter or Instagram these days. So
it is, and you're right. It's less. But man, as you were saying that out loud, I've been painfully aware of it because a lot of my work overlaps with the collapse of social media. Well, let's be more honest. The collapse of specifically Facebook, Twitter, like kind of the 4 or 5. Pinterest is still considered social media, and it's doing just fine. Like no one has any problem. You can't get bear baited into a political debate on Pinterest. At least I don't think you can. It'd be very difficult. So it's like there's aspects of social media that's working. And it's just we've sort of been in this melees for a little while. But it's interesting to me that you're right. In 4 years, it's 2019, somewhere around mid to late 2015, it just all shit the bed. And it's like, wow, that happened fast. And it's just like this thing that, I used to remember, back in my day, I went onto Facebook to talk to friends, not to fight with enemies. And now it's just like, ooh.
Well, how do you feel about how the second episode of Tech Talk with Todd and Taylor is going?
That's right. This is another covert episode. No.
Unplanned detour.
Let's talk Watchmen. Let's do Watchmen. No more tech.
So basically, like when we were chatting before we hit record, I was like, I'm overwhelmed with stuff to talk about. Not that I don't have any formed opinions on it. You have a helpful guide for us to go from, but quick takeaway, like, are you in the last 2 episodes, because we haven't talked about it for 2 episodes, so we're talking about episodes 7 and 8. Are you still processing it? Do you think you got a good hand on it? We learned a couple things that went a certain direction. What's your feeling?
Well, it's interesting. I thought about all that. I was super into them, but it's clear that like from episode 6 on, it's almost like they spent the time building this Watchmen adjacent kind of universe that was really interesting and kind of nuanced, and there's familiar stuff from the book, but it's almost more in the background. As much as I love Jean Smart killing it as Laurie Blake, she wasn't like the main character, right? It was all in the background. From episode 6 on, it's like, oh, no. The book it's like the book got thrust right into our faces. Like, remember this? Remember Dr. Manhattan? Remember, like, it's just, so it was kind of jarring to have that, the canon pushed so far back into our face. That took a little adjustment. And now I can't wait to go back and watch everything. I'll probably binge it, but watch it within like a weekend, right? Like all 9 episodes. That was the other surprising thing. I thought we still had 2 more. And when at the end of episode 8, they're like, 1 more episode. I'm like, wait, they're ending on 9?
Yep.
Is that symbolic? Is that just production? Like, what is that about? Because most of these HBO shows are 10. Very strange.
Yeah. Well, so on something you said there about now that they've run head on into canon, let's talk about something that's a big canon thing that Dr. Manhattan lives among us.
Yeah.
What is your first big takeaway from that?
My first big takeaway was I was correct. I completely called it. If you go back into, I think even our first watching episode where we talk about 1 and 2, I said he's probably, I think I gave a couple different theories, but I said Cal. I definitely said Cal. I'm like, he's probably going to be Cal. I thought maybe if he's not Cal, he's their adopted son, because there was some interesting little nuance there too. And that was kind of, I don't think I made a third prediction, did I? It was clear.
I would say you Cal'd it.
Yeah, I Cal'd it. I mean, that was, if it wasn't going to be Cal, I was actually more shocked if it wasn't revealed to be him. So when we see, it is him at the end of 7, it's like, aha. And it's interesting. it's less and a lot of people were shocked by that. Fair enough. It was less that for me and more like, ooh, they're dropping this nugget right here and now, closer to the end. So it's not so much, the mystery, like, who is Dr. Manhattan? Like that wasn't, thankfully, that was not, threaded like J.J. Abrams through the entire series, only to be disappointed. It was just kind of this little nugget, and they never showed him really. And there was some people kind of, Will was like, maybe I'm Dr. Manhattan. There's kind of some flippant sort of jokes about it to almost sort of throw you off the scent or to make you, just to show you that is not the most important thing. And then it turns out to be the most important thing. Like everything in the show hinges on Dr. Manhattan now all of a sudden, both in terms of Angela as the main character, but also the 7th Cavalry's plan, Laurie Blake's involvement in that plan, like Lady True's involvement in that plan, like everything now hinges on that guy. And I ask you, sir, you mentioned maybe 2 or 3 episodes ago, you had said, like, I hope he doesn't show up at all.
Correct.
And so to you, did this disappoint you that we got to see? And I should be very clear, it wasn't that he was thrust back into it, but that we actually do get to see him. It was, his face and everything, all of him, obviously.
I do like how they revealed it in episode 7. That not just like Angela clocking him in the head. They could have done it in a nicer way for me.
Seriously.
But the way Lady True gave you so many details about, like, she knows he's here on Earth, he's not on Mars. She knew all this stuff, and then the way she baits Angela as she's walking to the elevator and is like, "Don't you want to know who it is? Like, I just told you he's living on Earth, and you don't seem at all curious about it." That I think was like a gentle landing into it being Cal. But I agree. Like I'm not agree. I'm not disappointed or anything, but I didn't want to see Dr. Manhattan. Mm-hmm. And he is now central to everything. And I don't know how I feel about that. So yeah, do you?
It's almost like there's 2 different shows now kind of competing for importance because, and I'm sure we'll find out in the finale, we haven't seen Looking Glass since episode 5. So he's just been gone. And we assume he's probably undercover or sort of infiltrating the 7th Cavalry, but that's, and that's fine. But they built him up to be such an interesting character to have him just removed from the equation so that we had the room to look at John Osterman. Like, I don't know it almost feels like it was a really bold move to bring Dr. Manhattan in at this juncture and to just out and open make him Yahya Abdul-Mateen. Like, it's like, oh, no. It's not just his voice. It's actually we're going to paint him blue. Yeah. We're going to make him naked. Here he is. And it was like, oh, wow. Okay. And to HBO's credit, and probably for budget reasons too, like, he's glowing in sort of the traditional Dr. Manhattan for a little bit, but a lot of it's just a painted blue Yahya Abdul-Mateen. So that was interesting. But then it's like, so in some ways there was this courageous move to, like, say, hey, we are going to show you Dr. Manhattan. It's going to be a little different than you think. And we're going to commit to it. And we're going to make it more grounded than the Zack Snyder version of it, which I freaking love. As we know, I loved Billy Crudrip's version of it and just sort of that take on it. But this was interesting too. But it was also it felt a little, I can't think of the word, not cowardly, but just like they had really spent the time to build up, hey, we're doing our own thing. It's like I said, it's Watchmen adjacent. There's Lady True, there's Angela, there's Looking Glass. We're going to focus on them. And then to say, yeah, actually, no, we're going to bring in some of these old characters too. Like, and granted, the Hooded Justice thing was absolutely, that made sense, right? It's like, oh, we didn't know much about Hooded Justice before. This was a really nice way to sort of fill in that blanks. We have our cake and can eat it too. Great. But then to have Looking Glass not come back in, Wade rather, sorry, not come in.
Yeah. No. Well, and you did catch that when Petey goes into Looking Glass's bunker, he says they're definitely 7th Cavalry because they all have Rorschach masks. Well, except one. And so I'm pretty sure Looking Glass is wearing that right now.
Yeah.
And then there's another shot when Laurie, is confronted by Keen, and like I think Keen says something about like maybe he's here with us or something. There's some throwaway thing of like, there's a Rorschach in the background, and I was like, oh, he's there somewhere.
Hey, pause there. Do you think I mean, it's clear to me now, Keen roped in Lori because obviously he knows she's former Silk Spectre and she had a relationship with John and all that. I'm guessing he roped her in to use her as a card to manipulate John or to, trigger something.
Yeah. This is where it all gets really confusing for me. But I'm sorry to cut you off there. Do you have more about
Well, I was going to add on to that. I just don't know especially the way Jean Smart was playing her, I don't love the fact that Lori is now a damsel in distress. It's like,
yeah, exactly.
That doesn't really, and maybe it'll all kind of make sense. And again, this all comes back to our original, the very first thing we said on the first Watchmen episode is, if Damon Lindelof can stick the landing, this will have all been worth it. And it literally all roads lead to that finale. And it's like, what is he going to do? Because he has stacked so many Jenga pieces up that it's like, man, if you pull one, I mean, like the fact, if Lori loses her agency as a character in service of the ending, it'll have been a failure. Here's one example, I worry about this because you're thinking, okay, so the 7th Cavalry plan is to take Dr. Manhattan, kidnap him, basically steal his power somehow and kill him in the process, and then distribute that power to the 7th Cavalry. With an hour of television left, there's only so many things you can do in that time constraint. I feel like I'm already feeling like this is goddamn Lost all over again. It's like they have an hour left. Put it all together. But where I'm worried they're going is we've already seen John Osterman, when he became Dr. Manhattan, became almost detached from the mortal coil, so to speak. Like he became less human in the traditional sense and more just like, it's almost like he had a psychedelic experience. He's like, oh my God. So you almost could imagine if the 7th Cavalry were imbued with this power, would they not too just be like, racism, who cares? Let's go into the universe and make things. And I wonder if that's going to be just them, John will sacrifice himself to basically prove that point. Like, look, the only way to kill a racist is to open up, is to expand their mind, to open their awareness, to open their perception so that they're no longer, and this is Jesus, what a great way to do it. But that's such a cheap ending. It's like, such an easy, like everything worked out. We were just talking about Silicon Valley and other shows, finales. And it's just like, man, I can't, this has, if Damon Lindelof and crew settles into this sort of just, it was all easy in the end. Like that's going to be there's so many things that could be that could get in the way. So much turbulence that has built up around this plane.
Honestly, when I think of episode 9, I picture Poochie leaving Itchy and Scratchy, and I must return to my home planet now. And they just pull the cell up. They don't even bother animating it.
What a great reference. I love it. I mean, are you concerned about this? Because, we haven't seen Looking Glass since 5, so he'll probably have some heroic moment, but we haven't seen him. So it's like, does the audience forget about him at some point?
Oh, no way.
Forget.
Not after that episode.
But do you lose your sort of visceral relationship with that character so that when that moment comes, you're like, oh yeah, Looking Glass, that's right. Here's some other, I saved these for the end, but I'm going to throw this in here too because it's relevant now. There's still little things. Clearly, we're going to get a season 2 because there are a lot of things. I say that I have two main questions.
You're calling it right now.
I'm calling it right now. I'm going to cal this right now. Number 1, we don't know who the hell Lube Guy was or where he went or what he was involved in. He just disappeared randomly. Like, who was that? That seemed like a pretty important thing that we never came back to. And number 2, if Adrian Veidt gets off of Europa and gets back to Earth, that's an interesting, like he's back on Earth now. Lady Shrew owns this company. There's a lot of cool, interesting stuff there. They're not just going to leave that. It's like they've been building Adrian up for a purpose. My guess is to be some sort of threat or hero in season 2. It's like, where else do you go with that?
Well, it's really interesting that you say that because where I was going to go before you turned to that was to a similar place, which was like, as you're asking about Looking Glass, like what's his role going to be in the final episode? And I'm thinking like, well, what about Adrian Veidt? We got all of this story about him in the last couple episodes. Yeah. And then that could just be it. He could have just been window dressing. Like, that's what happened to him. That seems like I agree. For some reason that works for me with Adrian, but not because it speaks more to Dr. Manhattan. Now that we see him, it's like, oh, that was the vehicle to get Dr. Manhattan to lose his memory and powers and et cetera. But I don't think it works for Looking Glass. He could not have been just window dressing. Like he's
clearly
got to have a major role in this. What did you think about we get the solution to the second shooter last night, which is Dr. Manhattan, or John, in a moment of stress, zapped the 7th Cavalry guy that had shot Angela in the raid.
I like that. And I had forgotten I forgot when we first saw that scene, we had heard like a sound.
Exactly.
I totally forgot about that. So I'm cool with that. It makes sense. It actually makes more sense than if the second shooter was Judd, because that just seems like a little too easy, or not easy so much as just too cliche. Like, and here he was the whole time. And we have left Judd behind so long ago that to suddenly have that reveal and have him be there, it would seem muddy. And I like this a little better. So I'm glad they went this way.
Yeah. I would say so I've got a bunch of questions about the story with Dr. Manhattan, which we've already touched on several, but we haven't really filled in what we've missed from episode 7, which was Angela's detoxing from the nostalgia.
Yeah.
So she's at Lady True's compound. And there's a great brief. I always love it when there's a scientific thing that's explained in a nice way, so it's not just a hand wavy don't worry about it.
Yeah.
With the you're going to have these crazy flashbacks to your own memory, but that just means it's working, and they both both Lady True and her mother-daughter ask her about those specific things, what was the last thing that just occurred? Was it you or was it him? And so we get this that was such a freaking genius episode, banging around through the different timelines of Angela's youth and present day, and how it fit with Will, and all those cool things where she would see the scene once as herself and then once as Will, the parallels and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think Will wasn't there when she woke up?
That is my one complaint about that. I mean, that episode had a lot of good stuff. I love that they found a clever way to give you her backstory without just doing a bog standard flashback.
Yes.
It's it's almost like they'd crafted this amazing outline, we'll put that there. That works perfectly right there. And it makes sense in story. And that was the exact right time to reveal it. So just the sort of that at that point in the symphony, that is exactly where you put that. But when they opened the door and revealed the elephant in the room, which I kind of love the sort of double play on that.
Oh, yeah.
It makes sense too. Cause why, if they had Ben Will in there, that would have made sense as well. But it's just she's got a lot of crap that they have to download into this elephant. And it also kind of shows the sort of, moral gray area that Lady True operates in. We got two of those moments.
God.
The one that's I'm assuming this is animal cruelty. I'm assuming the elephant doesn't enjoy this, having these terrible things pumped into its head. And then we get a second one right after that, very shortly after that. She's like, oh yeah, that's my mom. I'm my daughter is actually my mom. I'm raising her. And I'm going to implant her with memories too. It's
I
Christ.
cloned my mom and I downloaded all her memories. Jesus.
And then the sort of and my dad's coming too. And it's wait, what? Who's that? I mean, so that's another little nugget that's who's her dad? I mean, we don't have time to get into that right now. So it's just all these things kind of necessitate a second season.
Yeah. But I love the play on the elephants never forget thing. And of course, that's where you're going to download all your memories.
Yeah. I don't understand why Will wasn't there. He knows that she took all his nostalgia. He knows that she now is, she survived. And so she's probably got, she knows everything about him. Why the hell wouldn't he be there to offer context, comfort, something to actually finally bond with this woman who, he didn't even know existed a couple, 10 years prior. And it's it seemed odd that he wouldn't be there.
And so this brings up so many questions in my mind. It's one is that maybe part of their plan is that he actually has to be out there being hooded justice in some way to bring down the 7th Cavalry. Another thing is that if he had been there, he might have been the link that helped explain it to Angela, look, she's not crazy. This all sounds crazy, but now it's not because you saw my memories. But the other thing that builds on that is that I think Angela played it off like she thought Lady True was crazy, but because she knew the whole time, Dr. Manhattan is actually living in my house. Yeah. She, there's sort of a layer there where she was I actually know she's not crazy.
Yeah.
But Angela's having to play it out like, I really believe you're saying crazy things, even though I know you're not actually saying crazy things.
We already saw Will hanging out at the True compound a couple different times. Right. So it's like, why would he leave? It's like she wakes up there. It's like, oh, clearly this is a safe environment for these two characters to have another, because they haven't seen each other since he got lifted up in the car. She has not seen him since that episode. And now she has more questions than ever, and she knows him better than ever. So why the hell would you keep them apart in that scene? This finale there are so many moving pieces to lay into this finale in a way that makes sense. I am a little, what I've seen so far has built up great trust, but I'm like, man, how are you? I go back to my metaphor of a kid sitting in a restaurant holding a lit stick of dynamite and half his fingers are blown off and he's just sitting there very calmly, just like, just watch this. This will be me. Just wait.
Trust me.
Just trust me. You're like, should we leave? No. Just stay. This will be cool. Okay. The other thing that was interesting about that episode is that, and I had sort of predicted this, I forget if it was publicly or not, but I thought when we saw Lori in those phone booths, I'm like, what a Dr. Manhattan ain't listening to those messages. There's got to be some kind of Vite Industries thing or something or maybe the government is using it to just sort of spy on people. Ended up being Lady True, which is kind of fun.
I love the giveaway from that was like, this is one of those things where we're not even going to keep it a mystery. It's just Lady True says, I own and operate hundreds of these like Manhattan booths all over the world. Yeah.
And she's collecting them.
She gives away the ghost right there. And you're like, yeah, of course she is.
Which makes perfect sense. It's like, of course she'd own them. And then likewise, was episode 7 was the same one where we got the trap door, right?
Yes, it was.
Yeah. So we had these two kind of interesting reveals. We had Lady Shrew just being like, no, that's me. I did this. And, not really masking her machinations much. And then we have Lori going back to the Crawford house, which she had already been to once before, remember, where she came in and she walked in. We never got to see that conversation with Judd's wife. Apparently it was just standard stuff. She goes back again and Judd's wife's like, basically turns on her Dr. Evil. It's like, oh shit. And she,
God, that was so perfect.
hits the trap door thing a couple times. It doesn't even work. And Laura's like, what are you doing? And then falls in.
Just the way she even reveals that when she was like, well, that was the original plan.
Yeah.
And you're like my face, like then they cut to Lori and I was like, she's making the exact expression I'm making right now, which was like, did you just confess? Like what?
And I even thought another sort of pet theory that I don't think we've talked about before is I'm like, if Judd isn't Dan Dreiberg, which that was put to rest obviously in episode 6, I was like, maybe his wife is like the secret sort of brains behind the whole thing. Cause he never really, they intentionally didn't focus on her much. And I'm like, what a perfect person to be like, it's her plan all along. I mean, she's part of it, but she's not the brains behind it necessarily, at least as far as we know.
And not to jump around too much, but oh my God, that moment when Angela asks the question through Dr. Manhattan to Will about like, how did you know about the Klan robe? And then to have her in real time realizing like, oh no, did I start all of this? Did I plant this whole thing? Which was such a crazy circular timing thing, But
I don't know why she was worried, because if she hadn't told him, the 7th Cavalry was still going to do what they were going to do. It's not like that plan would have been thwarted. If anything, she helped herself by sending that message to her grandfather so he had time to prepare and think about all this and, put a plan together. So it was weird that she's like, oh no. I'm like, no. This is okay. This is a good thing. Before we forget, right after that moment, the 7th Cavalry comes guns ablazing with their proton cannon or whatever the hell that thing is. And the entire time I'm thinking, why John has already zapped away the kids. Like almost the first thing he does is like, get the kids out of here. It's like, okay, so then you and Angela get out of here too. And it's weird to me that he is, because I was going through Reddit comments and stuff, and somebody said, well, no, because he's aware of what's going to happen, he can't change it. I'm like, and you can get into this big circular determinism argument, and I don't want to do that. But it's like he already took action to get the kids to safety. Why the hell would he not do that unless the ending justifies the means?
Why would he let the cannon blast him? Like, it's so weird to me that he shows up, rescues Angela, knowing that there's still someone manning the tachyon cannon or whatever. Like,
why would he turn his back to it? Like, it was such like Angela's smarter.
There's so much time there for him to just melt it or whatever. Do the thing where he pulls all the atoms apart,
100%. So he clearly wanted to be captured, which makes me think that like the whole end game is that, look, when racists turn blue, they're good people too, and it just becomes this like hokey like, see, just open your brain, open your perception. But it drives me nuts because Angela is way smarter than that. She was looking at him. It was clear the cannon was behind him. She could have easily been, John, get out of the way. And it's like she's just like, duh, what you gonna do? We're safe. Like,
and they've already set up that thing about like the moment he truly falls in love with her is when he realizes she will sacrifice herself for him. It's like that would have been perfectly fitting for her to kick him aside, take a few shots at the cannon, and then she gets hit, you know, or something, and like she dies. Yeah, like that actually would have made more sense to me than him just saying like, oh no, they succeeded or whatever. And
what a shocking, oh my God, now you planted that in my mind. What a shocking thing that would have been to have the main character die that way.
I was sure that was about to happen.
Well, and I didn't think that at all. I love this. And I love that because they would have teased earlier in that episode when he's like, you know, I can't have kids, but I can pass on my powers to a willing recipient if I wanted to. Because then if she dies, it's like, oh, look, the kids, I can basically just ask them. I'm guessing the older boy would want to become like another, you know, basically become a Manhattan 2 or something. The girls maybe wouldn't. I don't know, just because he seems more of like kind of loner and it would work. But then he basically raises the kids. Like that would be, I don't know, here's another question. Why do you think he sent them to Will? And why the hell was Will at a movie theater, if we're to believe that?
Did I fall asleep during this?
No, he zaps him away, and she's like, "Where did they go?" She's like, and
oh,
Cat
that's
was
right.
Like,
he tells them.
They're with your grandfather at a movie. It's like, wait, why?
Well, no, he says they're at that theater, which I believe is where the Tulsa massacre started.
Oh,
and so I think it's more like they're at a significant place to the staging of whatever is going on.
I did not think about that at all.
I think that's what it is, because I think it's pretty heavily shown in those flashbacks of the massacre.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Not totally sure, but yeah.
Wow. Okay. All right. So why do you think? Are you going to fall on the side of like, you know, circular determinism, or are you like, why wouldn't John just, you know, change the past?
I totally reject that Redditor's argument because I feel like he is changing one of the things I've been thinking about after last night's episode was the missing piece to me in the John story. Like I really liked all the stuff about the, you know, like why that couple is represented in the life he created on Europa and all that stuff. That's kind of neat, kind of fills it in his like awkward, you know, I understand humanity now. What's missing to me is like, well, why after all that did you come back to fall in love with Angela unless you knew, like, because you're living all these timelines at the same time, that this problem would arise and Angela and her grandfather were sort of like central to fixing it. And so you would have to, you know, ingratiate yourself in some way. Like, that's what I'm wondering is like, I think he's already changing, quote, the past by having a relationship with Angela. Mm-hmm. Because I don't just buy that he like came to Vietnam. I don't know why I keep saying it that way. Nam. And found her. You know, that just does not ring true to me. So I think he's already messing with the past.
That's my point. That's why I mean he is actively. It's like Schrodinger's box. He's actively influencing it while living in it at the same time, and he just has the extra benefit of seeing all times at once. So it would make sense. I mean, in my head canon, if he's living all times at once that he exists in, but he can change the past and see it reflected in the future, it just seems like he can. Yeah. And the struggle for him as a character is, I can't mess too much because it'll just create. So there's a difference. Here's the other side of this. There's a difference between intentionally manipulating a moment to create an outcome, like, hey. And this will be really, really pedantic, but it's like, hey, I know in 10 years, if I, you know, invest in this stock, I could have $1 million, you know, like, and just take a Manhattan equivalent of that. It's a very different thing to say, if I know that something bad is going to happen, so I'm just removing us from the game board entirely. And too bad. Unless his heroic moment is, if we play along, I can twist this. There is an ending to this that actually is better, but I have to be captured to make it happen. Which is, you know, if that ends up being where we're going, fine. As long as it's not, I'm telling you, man, if we do get an ending, which is, the 7th K, like maybe Keen and a couple other guys, or maybe they all turn into blue, kind of blue super people, and they're just like, let's just go, and just like that's the ending. I'm gonna be like, what the, what a wasted arc.
And another ending that I don't think would work is if they do end up getting superpowers, one or two of the members or something, and then we have one of those like gods versus gods fights that like we see in Justice League and Avengers and all that kind of shit, where it's like it's just a bunch of big blue guys like shooting laser beams at each other. Like that would be so unsatisfactory.
They'll subvert that if they have. I mean, they may set it up only so they can subvert it, which would be ideal. It's like, oh, you think that's where that's gonna happen? No, they can't. I don't, man. Let me ask you, do you like this depiction of Dr. Manhattan? We've only ever had one sort of cinematic version before. And I don't know if you ever saw that motion, there's like somebody, I forget.
No, I didn't actually.
The motion comic that they did which is like, I think it's even Alan Moore doing the Rorschach voice. Cause it's all like, I love the night. And it's very droll, but that was the only other sort of non-book version of Dr. Manhattan. So we've only ever had truly one, which is the Billy Crudup, Zack Snyder verse one, which I'm fine with. What did you think of this version? Like, I mean, does it mesh better for you?
I actually thought, I was actually surprised that it did not seem too different, that it all kind of fit for me. I like the way they handled the voice. Like she makes a comment about that. And even though it's clearly like his voice, he did
a great job of doing sort of innocent monotone without it being hokey. It's like, this is what it is. Here's a question, but my shock was they spent most of episode 8 not showing you his face. And I'm like, that they're just going to play into that. We're going to hear him and see him, but not see his face so that you can almost imagine, the movie and this kind of exist in the same universe.
That's exactly what I thought was going to happen. Yeah.
And then, you could still believe that because the fully realized Dr. Manhattan is basically the same design. By the way, fun little Easter egg. Well, I have 2 Easter eggs for you. One, they reference 2009 as when Angela and John meet. That's when the Watchmen Zack Snyder movie came out, February of 2009. So that's fun. And number 2, I learned this after the fact. When they were auditioning, they cast Regina as Angela, and then they were reading in Cal. They knew they were casting Dr. Manhattan too, but the people auditioning for Cal did not. They cast Yaya, and then they told him like, and by the way, you are also going to be Dr. Manhattan. So it's like which is tricky because they had to find. Here's the thing that I found most interesting. Remember in the Watchmen, the Zack Snyder movie? Obviously, Billy Crudup's a good-looking guy, but he's not like this built, hulking, sort of guy. And the CG Dr. Manhattan is purely CG. Yahya Abdul Mateen is just he's a beautiful man. Yeah. And so like they actually had him naked walking across the snow and he was just him. And it's like, oh crap. So they can actually they don't have to even CGI this guy. They can just like make him glow and paint him blue. And it's like, he is Dr. Manhattan. I thought that was kind of interesting. It's like, wow, they really cast, and they cast it so perfectly because he has to be this unassuming guy when he's Cal. Where he's not distracting enough, where you just kind of don't think about him too much. And it's like, hey, he's just going to be there. And then he has to turn out this dual performance once he's revealed. What a brilliant move, I thought.
Yeah. And it's so funny too, to like think back. And this is one of those things that'll be revealed even more when we watch it after the series is done. There's that part after the funeral where one of the kids asks about death. Yeah. And he just in this like totally flat tone is like, no, there is no heaven. Like the switch just turns off. Like, he basically gives a Dr. Manhattan answer without even knowing that he is Dr. Manhattan, sort of, on the conscious level.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about Lady True real quick.
Yeah. We got to hit her.
Let's go back to Will. Why would Will trust her? Like, it makes sense why he trusts Dr. Manhattan, but why would he trust her?
Well, to sideways jump, that flashback to Manhattan meeting Will, I loved that. Mm-hmm. I just loved that, everything about that whole idea and the way it was set up in 2009. But yeah, Lady True does not. I mean, on one hand, I want to give her the credit of like she's one of those people who's got some nuts ideas, but she shows you what she can do in order to prove herself. It's kind of like, I don't need to like convince you of this. I'll just show you that I can do it. That's great. But a ton of the stuff she shows is pretty freaky and like not great. So yeah, I'm in the same place of like, why would you trust her with this? I mean, I guess she's the only person that you could do it.
Yeah.
That could stop this.
But is she trying to? Okay, so what is her ultimate aim? Because I mean, obviously she's got plans within plans, like it's goddamn Dune. But what is her? Let's start with the Millennium Clock. What do you think that is truly for? Because they've already turned it on. It's not like they turn it on and all the white supremacists just get brainwashed. It's working. It's on. But what is its true point?
I don't know. That's a great question. But it definitely has something to do with whatever they're doing, right? Like it's gonna mess with their little teleporter thing.
You'd think so, but is it also, or is it? I mean, she clearly has a love of Vite. Is that some kind of scoop to bring him off of Europa? Because the other, I'm already starting to like trying to pregame this finale. If John, so you can't have a season 2. And have it be interesting and have Dr. Manhattan still running around. So I'm almost thinking they have to kill him.
Yeah, he's got to go.
But so then if they kill him, how the hell do they get Adrian off of Europa? What is the whole point of that storyline except to get him off Europa? Maybe True's like thing. I mean, she obviously has she loves the guy. She has a statue of him in her garden.
Yeah. She bought all of his former works, all his copyrighted material and stuff.
It's all still there. Maybe she's the only person on it. Because remember in episode 8, when we meet Adrian back at Karnak, which by the way, I loved the show's depiction of Karnak. It was just like you could see the it's very, very, very comics loyal in terms of the design. Yeah. You could see you see his like dome and like the glass is all broken in from when John got big and like crashed into it and everything. And so Adrian's in his thing and it's his like lair, which I love the movie one too, but it's crazy how much the show took things that the movie did okay and just made them so much better. Yeah. And that was one of them. And you see him there. And I am more and more, I was really not a big fan of casting Jeremy Irons as this. And the more I see him on screen, I'm like, oh my God, I almost want HBO to just redo the Watchmen with, Gene Smart being de-aged as Lord. I just want to see it. Cause I'm like, God, the more I see Jeremy Irons playing in this character, I'm like, God, this is a much more nuanced and interesting character. But when he's like, where was I going with this? Oh, he's like, I did all this for humanity and no one cares. And like the few people who actually know what I did, they don't care, which makes you think, oh, his message to Robert Redford just completely fell on deaf ears. Remember in that thing where Looking Glass is watching and he gives his little intro and he's like, for the next 6 hours, I'm going to tell you. And I was like, God, that's I can almost imagine Redford going, I don't care. Just like turning it off. Like, so you almost see Adrian Veidt like in this state, like nobody cares. Lady True might be the only person on earth who truly cares and like who knows what he did, who cares and like is almost like the ultimate fangirl. Like, look, I'm inspired by you, but we need to restore you to your glory and we're going to bring you back to earth. Like that would be kind of cool if that's truly her game is to bring him back. It removes some of her agency, so maybe not. I don't know. Otherwise, what's the clock for? Like, I mean, so going back to my question of why would Will trust her if she plays a crucial role? Because, he's had a 10-year head start on all of this. So he's had not only time, but, resources. He inherited all of Nelson's, wealth and assets and everything. So he's had a lot of time to plan and prepare. My guess is, he may have met Lady True at some, benefit or something. It's like, hey, let's team up. And it's going to be really interesting. I can't wait to come back to this, this episode and kind of like fill in all the blanks with what we see next week. What do you think? I mean, if you had a call right now, what do you think the Millennium Clock is for? It's in Tulsa. It's gigantic. It's mysterious. It's working. So it's whatever it's doing is already happening, so to speak.
So I think one of the things that's like just not been clear, or I just haven't understood it, is that whole teleportation thing, whatever they called it. And we see in the flashback this week to Adrian, where he's just like dumping the like squid through the little teleportation hole.
So glad I answered to that, by the way.
Yeah. And Dr. Manhattan's like, I see you're still messing with people with this, I thought it would be I thought the Millennium Tower would be some sort of like disruptor to that,
Okay.
like it's going to catch them in mid transport or something. But I do see, especially after like all the points you raised, that maybe this is some sort of way of amplifying that ability so that she can go get Adrian Veidt on Europa, or send all of the racists there, or vice versa. I don't know. I also think that would be too cute an ending, but I wonder if she knows what's been going on there, because she knows, she's somehow observed and been clever enough to figure out that the Dr. Manhattan on Mars is a recording.
Yeah.
And it does sound from John confessing that in this episode that that's who that is, or that's what that is. It makes it sound like, well, John set that up.
Yeah.
It's otherwise he would have said like, oh, I worked with Adrian to do this. I think he just would have been forthcoming about it, but he wasn't. So I think he set up that weird little thing so that people wouldn't know he was back on Earth. So she somehow figured that out. Maybe she's also been looking at Europa and figured out what's going on over there. I don't know.
Well, let's talk about
that sounds so weird. Or did she have the satellite that saw Adrian's message of save me? Is that a true satellite?
Let's talk about Adrian for the rest of this, because it kind of all paths flow through him somehow. How did he know? Let's start there. He knew a satellite would be coming around at that particular time, and maybe it's just in orbit around Europa and he's just been tracking it. But it seems like that would be weird. So he knew somehow he was signaling somebody. It would have to be somebody who's like, wait, Adrian Veidt's on Europa? What the hell? Like that's a weird thing to learn, right? And you're just like, what? And he spelled out "save me" with these like, what? So yeah, Lady True would be an ideal person to intercept that. Unless he knew like a Veidt satellite was just already, maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, good point.
He knows his own satellite. It's like Bruce Wayne. He's got stuff everywhere, and he's got, there's a Veidt satellite that was doing deep solar system studying. Lady True owns that satellite. So, now that she's acquired Veidt Industries, and so she would, somebody in her camp would have seen that.
And not to risk confusing everyone else as much as I am confused, because I was almost about to get out like a spreadsheet last night to try to figure out the timelines. But I think we know, because of the trial, that escape attempt happened a year before the events of the show.
Yeah.
So basically, that is not in present time. So she could have seen this a year ago.
That's right.
Figured it out and then moved to Tulsa. Like, okay, this
she's
is
moving fast. She's moving. We saw in one episode.
Yes.
They were very explicit. Like, she's buying up land like crazy fast, and she's building this thing crazy fast. I forgot all about that. You're absolutely right. And maybe that's the only reason the trial was 365 days long.
Kind of wonder that. Yeah.
Because that was, it was a really funny moment. It's like the day 365 of this trial, and you're like, ha ha ha. But I like that deeper meaning of like, no. This has been going on a year since he did that. I love that.
Yeah, not to be too much of a space nerd about it, but I doubt that 365 days is a year on Europa. So at the time, I was like, were they talking about 365 Earth days? Or, like that's what went through my head. But then now that we're talking about all this, I'm thinking like, oh, maybe that was to establish that the save me message had been out for one Earth year,
How long is a day on Europa?
Are you asking Google?
Yeah, 3.55 Earth days is 1 day on Europa. So it may even be longer than that. What did you think about that whole?
Oh my God!
I mean, I love this theory.
That would be about 10 years.
Seriously?
Yeah. Right. 365 days times 3.5 would be.
Oh my God! Wow.
Yeah.
You may have just cracked this case, sir.
I don't think so. It's so inexact.
But then here's so let's
10 years, I think.
That makes great. They wouldn't have revealed that fact if not for some other. That's just one of those Lindelofian things where it's just like, I'm just going to put this right here, and it's not going to mean anything right now, but in a couple episodes you're going to care a lot. What do you think the trial was all about? Like, why do you think? Okay, let me back up. Who do you think the huntsman or the game warden
is? I don't know. Isn't that weird? And then,
because I'm even more confused before, because he was like, I thought, well, maybe he's like the first. I really sort of, I had figured the whole Europa thing was what it was. I'm like, it was clearly because John at the end of Watchmen is like, I'm going to go I've had enough of life on Earth. I'm going to go create some. So it's like, well, clearly he created Europa. The only question in my mind was, did he imprison Adrian there, or is it something else? And unfortunately, I like what they ended up doing better.
I agree. Yeah.
But then I thought, well, maybe the game warden's like the first guy. He's just still there, but that's not true, because he's like, look, I was there in the beginning before he even started making this stuff. So I'm like, well, who are you? Like, who are you? What is all this?
Oh man,
he wouldn't take off his mask. Even in that moment, of all the moments for him to like reveal himself, he did not. So then it's like, well, then who are you? Like the first attempt by John to create something and just it went awry? Like what is that guy?
Oh God, is it Eddie Blake?
Holy crap. Like a reincarnated Eddie Blake to like, wait, is
that his name?
Edward Blake is a comedian. A comedian died in New York. Edward Blake, the comedian.
Yeah. Is he, but is it someone else from the Minutemen universe?
That's
because of the mask
question.
And the little,
yes.
Okay.
And I'm wondering, it wouldn't, this is a really far. I say this knowing full well that I was like, Judd might be Dan. Maybe that guy's Dan. And I don't know why he'd be younger, but it's like, well, and I say this for two very specific reasons. One, the mask. It's like, well, I like what you're thinking. It's like, maybe this is some person from the Watchmen universe that we've seen before. And two, there are only, Rorschach, Manhattan. There's only 4 people who truly know what Adrian did. Laurie, Dan, John, and Rorschach. Rorschach's dead. So it's those 3. We know it's not John. We know Laurie's on Earth. Dan, we don't know where he is. We don't know quite what he's up to. It hasn't been revealed yet. It's very mysterious. You'd think that like the person most upset about what Adrian did would probably be Dan or Laurie. And if Dan's there, that's why would Dan be there? I don't know. It seems really far-fetched. What
if it's Hollis?
But then why would he be younger? Like it's just like he's a younger guy. He's a more, who knows? Here's a better question. How do you think Adrian Veidt, it's now that I'm thinking back through this, like that mansion, that sort of manor house was not of him. It was just sort of put there. So he had to invent like tomatoes, like just with the technology of his time. And he had to invent like all these things like that. I kind of love the sort of subtle way they're like, Adrian Veidt's a genius. He had to create like all this stuff just from shit around this house, like genetically engineered tomatoes. He had to figure out how to build like a machine to like, rapidly age, like, swamp babies and all this stuff. So it's just like that.
Well, no, Manhattan said he did that.
No. But remember, Adrian plucks them out of the water, takes them to like his basement laboratory, puts them in like the microwave and turns it on. It's like he built all that just with the shit he just found around the manor house. Like it wasn't like he brought along all 8. And I say this because we saw very specifically, like John goes, all right, I'll send you there now. He just sends them there. The other question is, how did he get his costume up there? So maybe other stuff came along with him, or that's another good question too. Like, why is the costume there? And then why is he wearing it during the trial? Like, why such theater and formality? And then why is he not doing anything about it? It makes me wonder, was he just so bored? Like, did he fall into the same, like, because remember when we first meet him, he's riding in on his horse. He's all like, hello, everybody. He's all very chipper and happy. And by the next time, he's like, oh, God. And it makes me wonder if he didn't discover what John did, which is like, these people, there's nothing interesting. Like, they just love, but they don't know. They don't care. Like, nothing interesting ever happens here. So he starts to like have his little plays and like, he just starts to disregard them as even people. They're just things that he can just do with what he wants. I'm almost wondering, when he was sitting there at the trial, somebody mentioned like he looked like he was having a sincerely contritious moment. I'm like, I don't know if contritious is a word, like a contrite moment. And I'm like, no. I think he was bored to tears. I think he was sitting there like, oh Christ, I'm still here. Yeah. It's still happening. And whatever, anything.
I think it was just proof to him, like, this all means nothing. Like, whatever I do, there are no consequences. So go ahead and put me through this stupid court thing. Like
something is happening that's interesting. That's not just me repeating the same year again and again and again.
Yeah. Well, although we did explain your Groundhog Day, don't you think?
Now that you say that, okay, I think the Groundhog Day thing is no longer apropos, because we know these clones just are sort of blind. They're just blindly allegiant to whoever is lording over them. So they would make the same birthday cake and so my guess now
they're just trying to serve. Exactly. Yeah.
So my guess now is that birthday cake or the anniversary cake, I should say, was accurate. There was 5 or 6 years of the cake. And then he was in the trial, which was at least a year in Earth terms, but probably more if we want to go by. The question is, are we going by Europa days or Earth days? In either case, that was another year where stuff just happened that just passed the time. So I definitely don't think it was a Groundhog Day. It wasn't a loop. It wasn't some kind of, it was a snow globe, but not in that sort of
I agree. Yeah, I don't think it was a Groundhog Day situation. It was just the repetitive behavior because of the we know the circumstances now of those people just have to serve, and for whatever reason that's what they've learned to do.
What do you think were you surprised to see a post-credit scene?
I'll be totally honest with you. I was more surprised to read about it in your notes just now.
You didn't stick around for the post-credit scene?
No. And just a note to all people who make films, stop putting post-credit scenes. That's so fucking stupid.
I was shocked. So can I tell you what it was? Do you want to?
Yeah, go for it.
So it was so the Shazam post-credit scene. He's sitting in his prison. The game warden comes in. He's basically dresses him down a little bit more. He's you asked for all this. And then he's and by the way, here's another cake. And he gives him a cake and has 7 or 8 candles on it or something. And he's and he's just sitting there oh, Christ. And he looks at the cake and you remember that one scene when Crookshanks what's the guy's name? No, Crookshanks is the girl. Phillips. Mr. Phillips gives him a horseshoe to cut the cake. And he's we should cut a cake. They had remember the Crookshanks lawyer gave him a wink during the trial and they never really paid that off. Well, they actually baked a horseshoe into the cake as as a way for him to get out.
And he takes to get out, yeah.
And he starts to Shawshank his way out of the prison. And you're well, that seems. Why would you go through all the trial and stuff just to get to this? Just seems so pedantic for Adrian Veidt to have to do all this. And it was a weird post-credit scene because he's just aha, ha ha. He just starts laughing as he's digging his way out of his jail cell. So it was very strange. It makes me wonder have they just it goes back to my original point. Kind of feels like the show that they were originally building, they're it's just not as fun anymore. Let's just do the Watchmen. And it's just they're just let's just make it kooky and bonkers and fun. And you're and that's fine, but it's you guys were doing something, we were laying very specific groundwork, and the wackier Adrian Veidt gets, the more you're sort of betraying that original sensibility. Maybe again, if they can stick the landing, it'll have all been worth it. And I guess we'll find out in less than a week.
I must return to my home planet now.
Yeah.
I didn't even know Poochie was from space.
I don't know. So let's can we bang through some quick questions?
Yeah.
Will Dr. Manhattan die?
Yes. What do you say?
I was going to originally say no, but now that we've talked through the Lady True, because I'm somebody has to save Adrian or rescue Adrian, I should say. And I actually like Lady True being that person better. So I think Dr. Manhattan will die. A, because it's really expensive to do that character. B, if he's hanging around, it's the same problem for the show that it happens in the world. If there's this crazy, none of these superheroes matter as long as he's walking around. And so you got to get him off the board somehow in a way that satisfies this story and these characters and then sort of paves the way for a season 2.
Totally.
Will any of the 7th Cavalry gain his powers, do you think?
I don't. I would not be surprised if Keen did.
I was going to say Keen too. Is it going to be one of those things where it's like Jafar, where he gets it for a moment, and it's he realizes oh, I can't hold, and he just disintegrates, or it goes wrong or something?
Well, I don't know. I'm curious how they're setting up the quote unquote science around this, which I think is interesting. Yeah.
Whatever happened to the lube guy? Who do you think that is? What do you think that's all about?
Well,
for those of you who are wondering, it's the dude that Angela was chasing who greased himself up with lube and slid he's going down
into the sewer.
Into the sewer, but he slid like he was on ice. It was just it was crazy. And it's what a crazy character to introduce and then never talk about again.
Right. It would have made more sense if we kept seeing zany bad guys like that.
Yeah. So I mean, I originally thought maybe that was Petey for some weird reason, but it's like, well, that makes. Why would he be running around doing that? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Boy, what if Lube Man comes to the rescue of everybody? I really think that was truly like window dressing, like, you know.
But then that just seems like a crazily interesting. I need to go back and rewatch it because maybe there sort of was more context that I just was missing. What do you think happens to Lori?
I don't know. Do you have guesses, prognostications?
Because we haven't seen Dan yet. It would be weird to knock her off and and then have Dan be like, "Oh, I was in jail the whole time." Like, you need a reunion, and you need Jean Smart in this series as long as you can possibly have her. I think her involvement is instrumental into what happens to John. Like, Keen invited her to Tulsa. So now that we know that Keen's kind of the mastermind, it's like, oh, we're going to kidnap Dr. Manhattan. We better have his former squeeze there too, in case we can't. And now that I'm thinking out loud, I almost wonder if, because remember the other big question this whole time was, why did Judd become so buddies with Angela when he's sort of a secret white supremacist too? Like, why, what was that all about? And I'm almost wondering if he wasn't, supposed to like almost like infiltrate her to make sure that Cal was John Osterman, really, or if not that, or maybe in addition to that, maybe he was there to sort of like condition her down, so when the moment came, they could use her as bait or as something to capture, to get John. And maybe Lori was like the backup plan. So it's like, either way, we're going to have somebody John cares about in our presence, so that we force him to do this thing that we need him to do.
So doesn't Mrs. Crawford, the plan, she says, well, that was originally the plan. That is the Keen becoming president.
Yes.
And then the white supremacist secretly ruling plan.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then but basically she says, we changed it because we learned of the presence of Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah.
So, and how do we know that they know how they know of Dr. Manhattan?
I'm almost wondering, now this just popped in my head. I'm almost wondering if the night that the two shooters came in, shooter one, she does away with, shooter two, Cal zaps away. I'm almost wondering if Judd didn't come in shortly thereafter, or Judd saw like some flash of blue light. Ooh. Yeah. I would love it. I would love it if there was a little, you could even be a throwaway line where, like, everybody assembles at like the secret headquarters for the finale, and they're like, we thought it was you, like, meaning Angela. Like, we thought Manhattan was you. We didn't think it was your husband because, you were in danger, and and maybe that's why they got so cozy with her. It's like, maybe you're Manhattan. Like, let's just find out. Like, that would make sense.
You raise an interesting question. Do you think there's going to be a Judd Crawford flashback in the last episode?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Don Johnson can't be the last we see of him. He's I realized too, he did the same thing almost verbatim happened to Don Johnson in the series of I just forgot the damn name of the movie. It's the movie that Robert Rodriguez directed, but Quentin Tarantino was in with George Clooney. What the hell's that movie called? George, hang on.
Yeah, the vampire bar thing, whatever.
From Dusk Till Dawn. So the series of From Dusk Till Dawn, Don Johnson plays the Michael Parks cop character that in the movie, like, is in the very first scene when he comes in and he's like talking to the convenience store owner, and then they blow him away. That was Don Johnson of the series. So in episode 1, he dies, spoilers, and then through the rest of the episodes, like, they just do flashbacks to like that character. It's like, so here it is again. It's like, he must just love playing cops who die and then have to.
He's like the immortal Sean Bean.
He kind of is. You know what?
He still gets killed and everything, but he's like lives in flashbacks.
By the way, quick aside, I saw Knives Out over Thanksgiving. That movie, sort of Agatha Christie murder mystery. Yeah, Ryan Johnson. Don Johnson's in that too. It's like a lot of people are having this moment, but we are truly living in the Renaissance right now. Like, he is having this just beautiful, like, he's like the white Samuel L. Jackson. He's like, I'm just in everything. I'm delightful to be around. It's just like, you just want to see more of Don Johnson. And who would have thought the guy from Miami Vice is just, I even think back to like Django Unchained when I was like, Don Johnson, huh? Interesting. And then he just crushed that movie too. He's just sort of, he's having this beautiful time in his career, and I'm enjoying.
Where is Philip Michael Thomas?
Man,
where's Tubbs? Come on, justice for Tubbs.
He is hanging out with Andrew Ridgely and the other guy from the Apollo mission that was in the rocket when Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong went down to the moon. Like they all have a support group for each other, and Garfunkel. They're all there. Okay, a couple more questions. What happens to Angela?
I have no idea. When she did not get blasted by the tachyon cannon, I was like, well, I don't know what's going to go on now. I think she's going to be captured by 7th Cavalry and taken maybe. And so she's probably going to meet up with Lori, and that's what we're going to see next week. What
do you think happens to the kids and what happens to Will?
I feel like they're going to sync up with the Lady True side of things. What do you think?
Yeah, that's the most likely. So it all really does come down to the very first scene in this entire series was the the Black Wall Street Massacre. Like that was how we were introduced to this series, to this world. So it only makes sense for them to bookend that in a meaningful way. And if Will and the kids are at that theater where it all began, it makes me wonder, like, what's the symmetry of the story? Like, where are they, they've done to their credit, they've done a brilliant job of making this about race, but not exclusively about race. It's not like, oh, we're just going to shove it in your face. It's like, no. They were telling a very nuanced story about race that is impactful today, but could have been just as relevant 10 years ago, 20 years ago, et cetera.
Yeah. So there is a little clue that we get, which is True's mother-daughter tells Cal that he can't come in because they're about to turn on the Millennium Clock.
Oh my God, you're right.
So you can't come into the compound. So if Will and the kids are truly outside the compound.
But wait. The mother-daughter would have known that Cal was Dr. Manhattan. Like she would have been keenly aware of that.
True.
And so it's like you can't come in.
Maybe they're just keeping him out.
We may disrupt we may kill you if you come in.
Because that's true. Because Angela escapes. And and it's like brute force. She runs right through Red Menace and whoever.
So maybe the Millennium Clock is issuing some sort of interference or some kind of particle accelerate, something going on that
just for Dr. Manhattan. Yeah.
Or like if the 7th Cavalry succeeds, I'm going to call it right now. The 7th Cavalry is going to succeed in at least turning Keen and maybe a couple others into Dr. Manhattan. And then the Millennium Clock is basically like a giant, it will basically destabilize the Manhattan gene, let's just say for simplification. And so she'll turn that on. She'll basically like activate that. And anybody who is who's a Manhattan kind of person will just instantly die. So John won't have to sacrifice himself, but he will have to be a casualty of the war, and that we have to get rid of all of them.
Yeah.
Too. So maybe I like that a lot more. I'm going to stick with that's my Cal for the finale is that because you do, I mean, they've teased this up. They can't not show at least one of them going. I mean, you see kind of like a naked Keen in a machine or looking through a window. Much like John was in when he got turned. You see that in like the next. I know you don't watch the next week credits, but you see Keen in like this room, and the really quick flash. You're like, okay, so he clearly, and I mean, being the leader, he'd be the first one to go through the process anyway. So you can't like tease all this stuff and then not show it. And they even did the hard work. Remember back when when Veidt was doing his little play, they've already set it up so that. Keep in mind, a lot of the audience watching this has not read the book. So they kind of have to show you, hey, look, when a person goes into this thing to become Dr. Manhattan, like they burn away. Like they kind of seeded that already. So they could.
And John said it in this last episode. Yeah.
Yeah. So we got to see that paid off to some extent. But I think I like this idea. The only question is then how the hell does Adrian get rescued? And maybe that's for another day. But like that Millennium Clock thing will prevent anybody from ever becoming. Lady True recognizes that as like the most existential threat. Like, look, that everybody has the technology now. Just like anybody can make a bomb in their house and be like you don't need an army to be to disrupt the world. You can like hack the stock market or build a bomb in your kitchen. Like everybody, you see these like Oklahoma like Hicks are building like a Manhattan sort of, they're building a teleporter and all these kinds of things. So like the technology is out there. So she thinks, oh, the greatest existential threat to the world is other people becoming Dr. Manhattan. And she even says it when she's telling Angela, she's, the grand plan. She's like, they're going to find him and kill him, and then they're going to become him. She says it with almost kind of like this, like, she's angry about it. She's like, this can't happen. So I would almost imagine building this clock is like, look, nobody will have that power ever again. Yeah. And I'm going to basically create like this field across the earth that will prevent anybody, but it also means Dr. Manhattan himself can't exist either anymore. And that's okay.
As you were saying this, I'm literally in real time thinking she is the Watchmen's, like, everything in Watchmen is like the funhouse mirror of a superhero. Yeah. And she is the funhouse mirror version of Iron Man. Who's like, I'm so smart, and I got out of MIT when I was 16.
Oh, you're right.
And then I bought it. And then, but like, strangely, like all their inventions go to shit. Like, well, nostalgia didn't turn out the way I wanted. And, it turns out that all I'm doing is selling weapons to terrorists. And like,
God, you're right.
So what would Iron Man do? That's what Lady True is going to do.
Holy crap. You're totally, and she's playing it. So, you know what? She is as cocksure as Tony.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
She's just a little weirder, but not by much. Like, I'm going to recreate. If Tony had the time and the capability, he'd probably resurrect Howard too and do a genetic clone, and then and here's your memory.
Jesus, I mean, it's Iron Man 2, right? Where he's got the whole like illusory like past life that he can like, he can go into as himself and interact with his parents.
Yeah,
isn't that in Iron Man 2? It's like,
no, that's Civil War, because they build. Remember, Jake Gyllenhaal leads the team that builds the 3D.
Jake Gyllenhaal.
You haven't seen Spider-Man Far From Home yet, have you?
I have not actually, but he's in Civil War.
Not in.
Or the
retroactively.
Right.
He is.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Put it that way. I probably said too much. We'll stop right there.
That's okay.
No, I love that. I love that. I love it because I wasn't looking for it, but it makes so much sense now. Like, everybody's an amalgam of, or some kind of reference to something actual. The whole point of Watchmen is to take, let's go back. The original Watchmen book was, hey, let's take the Charlton characters, the Question, the Blue Beetle, all these, I forget what the Dr. Manhattan guy's name is. The Atom, or no, not something like that. Let's take these characters and do something interesting with them. And we're going to give them to Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. And those two guys said, we like these characters, but we're going to take them and make sort of mirrors, funhouse mirrors of them, to your point, and do something really interesting. And in the process, do a meta commentary on the entire state of the comics and superhero industry anyway. So you can almost see Lindelof going, okay, well, that's an interesting idea. We could do the same. There's been enough Marvel and comics movies, so people have a baseline of understanding of what the tropes and the cliches are. Let's subvert that. And I see them, but they're having to subvert that and subvert your expectations of what Watchmen is at the same time. So there's a lot going on. But I love that you're absolutely right. She is the Tony Stark of this universe. Let's just leave it there. I love that. I can't think of anything better to add on to that.
Perfect. Yeah, we would keep rambling. So I'm just we should call it right now. We'll just call it on this episode.
Let's do it.
And if you want to find more about panelism, usually we talk about comic books. I don't even know if I should say usually, but you can find us on Instagram at panelism.inc, INK. You can also find us on the web at panelism.inc, and you can find and download this podcast anywhere podcasts are found and downloaded. We're just called Panelism, and you should find us. Wow. We did it. We're holding our breath for 6 days until we see if that landing gets stuck. Ooh,
we will be, and we will certainly be back next week to talk about it. Because if they stick that landing, man, this will just be our next episode will just be us gushing and just be like, oh my God, did you see? If they don't stick the landing, it's gonna be a lot of me bitching and talking about what could have been. So that's what to look forward to, folks. We'll see you then.